Okay, so what we got here is a Kawasaki Ninja 250, and we're getting ready to wrap the tank. This is one of the most intimidating parts of the wrap, so I wanted to do a video to kind of show how to do this. Most bikes, that you'll unbolt them from the front and then you'll lift them up and prop them up with something. You can use a shoe or a plastic cup or anything to just kind of help prop it up off of the frame. The Kawasaki 250 though, it's going to unbolt from the back and then you're just going to pop it over these sides right here so you can lift it up. Now this does a couple things. This lets the bike be, or lets the tank be somewhat stable, but the main thing is you want it elevated off of the edge so it's not being touched by the frame or any of these trim pieces, so you can wrap below the body line of where the graphics are going to go. Now because this actual tank is resting on the backbone of the frame and it's not stable at the back because it has to be unbolted, it doesn't actually hinge. What I'm going to use is some cornhole bean bags. You could fold up some clothes or something like that if you wanted to too, and just kind of rest it in there, and that'll help it kind of be anchored and stable a little bit more. Okay, now for the most part, motorcycle tanks especially, because there's gas spillage basically, manufacturers will clear coat the graphics that's on the side of the tank. So this means you can't remove these. You actually can if you sand them and do a lot of prep work, but for the most part you just wrap over these, and then anywhere else on the bike that there's graphics you'll be able to remove those. And this actually did also have a dealership sticker right here, and you can see I removed it, but there's still some sticky tackiness there. We use a product called Goo Gone. This can be found at Walmart. Basically just spray it on, give it a little bit of time. I use the gel because the gel is a little less messy. It doesn't run as much. They also make a liquid version that'll run a lot more, but dealerships and stuff will buy that too. It's also good for like removing gum from carpets and things like that, but it works really good on stuff like this. And that stuff, take a look at it here. Once you can take a silicone squeegee to it and it starts peeling up where it's scratching like that, you'll know it's taken effect enough to help peel it off. It usually gets to that point within a couple minutes. So just basically remove all of it. So now once you have it scraped up, just take a paper towel and get the big pieces off of the stuff. If there's a little bit left, you can kind of rub it and get it off. Now you're going to clean the whole tank with alcohol, but if you see any of this Goo Gone stuff on there, kind of at least wipe it off a good amount. So now we're basically just going to take rubbing alcohol in a spray bottle. We're going to spray down the entire tank. You can be sloppy with it. It evaporates quickly if it gets to any other area that you're not going to work on, so you don't have to worry about it. Just wet it down really good. I used to say get a lint-free rag for this stuff, but you actually don't. You can use regular paper towels. Saves a little bit of money. You may wind up with small amounts of lint on it, but you could just blow that off, or you could just kind of watch how you're doing it and wipe it off. So you can use any cloth really, or if you do have the shop lint-free rags, those are handy to use too. So just make sure you scrub everything, kind of aggressively get all the little areas we're going to be wrapping down into past where this indention is, because that's the body line of where this trim piece goes in. So you want to make sure and clean below that area. So this is the step where you apply the 3M Primer 94. In previous videos I told customers, recommended the Primer 94 Dauber, which is like a bingo style marker. This is actually Primer 94 in a can. This stuff's only $8, which I think the Dauber was $12. The can's a lot easier for a couple reasons. For one, you get a lot more of it, but also when you have recesses and crevices, it's easier to use a brush to liberally apply this Primer 94 onto the bodywork. So if we take a look down here, you can see how there's a little tab anchor where you'd bolt on the bodywork to the side of the tank. If you had a dauber, it would have a hard time getting down in the crevice of that. So it's a lot easier to use a brush. And also, as you're brushing this on, you're going to do one part at a time. It's not like a paintbrush where you have to clean it every time. It does kind of get hard, but once you stick it in the can and kind of press it up against the edge, it gets new primer 94 on it, even after it's dried out. Or if you're taking like a week to do your bike and you're applying it at different hours of the day, you don't really have to clean off the brush. Just make sure and wet it up against the can, and it'll get soft enough to where it will be good enough for you to brush this stuff on. So you're going to liberally brush this stuff on all around the edges. Another place that we brush this primer 94 on is around the rim of the gas cap. And these are areas where we're going to trim. So what primer 94 does is basically allows the material to more aggressively stick to the bodywork. So wherever this stuff is, that's where the wrap is going to stick a lot harder. Now it'll stick pretty hard to the bodywork without primer 94, but you can still pretty easily pull it back up and reposition it and things like that. So that's why you want to be careful where you put this stuff, because where you put this at, the wrap's going to stick really hard in there. You'll still be able to pull it up, but it'll more aggressively hold it on the edge. So that does a couple things. That makes it last longer, and also allows you to trim to the edge rather than wrapping around to the back side and using edge sealer. You can actually just wrap up into the edge, perform your cut, and not even wrap underneath the bike as we showed in previous videos. So this saves a lot of time, and it still lets the wrap be resilient and not peel away from the edge. So right here is where the seat is. You can see there's a tab here that's welded on that anchors it in. You can see a mark where the seat was. We're just going to wrap slightly below that line there. So over here on this side you can see where the trim panel goes. So we're just going to apply primer 94 slightly below that trim panel. So this is the left side piece of the tank. Every template piece that's in the wrap is going to be shaped a little different for different bikes. But you'll notice it's shaped like a wedge, so it has a flat top. And this is really where the top seam of the tank is going to be. Now, of course, you don't have to make that cut really accurate, but when you're cutting the piece out, you do want to get pretty close to it. Like I say, you don't have to be super accurate with it, because you're going to trim, you're going to have excess on all these pieces, and you're going to trim them away. But you do want to get pretty close, and that's just so you can, as you're mocking it up, you're taping it to the side, you're able to easily see where you have excess area. Whereas if you have a lot of white around the edge, you might accidentally miss lining something up, and you might be wrapping an area that you mean to be wrapping with graphics, but you might only just have a little bit of white edge in it. So kind of a good idea to cut all the white out, and that's really just the background of the actual whole entire print roll is white. They used to be green, but we went to just making those backgrounds be white. Okay, so we've got the tank piece here. It's going to be positioned up in here like this, with this flat piece at the top. You just want to make sure you have good coverage to the end, and you want to make sure that you have enough area to go around to the back as well. So that looks about right. Now, a couple tips here: you want to move the handlebar out of the way so you have as much slack there. And also, we're going to tape this up before we wrap it. So another technique I like to do is rip off a few pieces of tape to quickly grab onto whenever I have the mock-up set up. You can just put those anywhere on the bike. Normally 2 or 3 pieces is all you're going to need. You will need more than one piece, because as you position it, tape in 2 areas, that's going to keep it from sliding. So let's just go ahead and put the piece up here. Make sure we've got enough area to cover. Then you're going to hold it flat, make sure it's covering it at the bottom, the area where the trim is for the molding. You make sure you got enough area all over, somewhere around that range. And then as you're holding it, you're simply going to take and press it all the way to one area down here like that. That's going to stabilize that end. And then we're going to use another piece to stabilize this end. And normally when you do a wrap, you're going to wrap half of it at a time. This is a rule for if you're wrapping the back glass of an SUV, or also if you're wrapping a bike. So if we're going to wrap the front half, that means eventually this tape has to come off in the front. So we're going to need two pieces of tape back here to stabilize it, to kind of keep it so it doesn't get twisted as we're installing it. So you could, wherever this ends up, you could kind of tape that there. If there's another area that seems to work, you could do that as well. Maybe right here at the bodywork. Just so it's stable whenever I take this piece off. So you can see it's not going to move that much. Okay, so we have it taped up, mocked up on the side. I've got an X-Acto knife with a new blade in it. You want to keep it sharp. You'll notice it'll start getting dull and that'll start tearing your cuts. It won't be as accurate. So go ahead and replace those as necessary. You can also use those cheap 99-cent utility knives that you get at Lowe's, but those aren't quite as accurate as this because they don't have a point. So start to peel it off like that. Just peel it back. Another trick you can do is actually fold this under and kind of tack it back so it stays out of the way. We're going to take and cut this backing off. Just be real careful with it here. Don't cut into the wrap. Just cut the backing off. And just discard that to the side. So then you're going to take this piece and actually notice the plane of the bike, the flat plane of the bike. You want to make sure this lays flat against that. So we could kind of pull it somewhat tight. Start somewhere around the middle. Just kind of get a tack point going. Don't really tack it down all the way, but if you start in the middle, you can kind of spread out and get rid of wrinkles as you spread it out. So at this point, once you have a good amount tacked in, this is a felt sleeve for a squeegee actually. Here's a squeegee. You can use this, but whenever I'm at this stage or I'm doing bikes, I don't use the flat squeegee a lot. I do to tuck in the corners, but areas like this, I kind of just put my fingers on it. So just work it out as you come up. Don't go all the way to where it curves, just to right around that area. Also, this area right here where I peeled the backing away, see how it gets down in there? If I did that, I would have a curve set in there, and if you start really wrapping it tight in there, it's going to be hard to fold this over and peel away the other backing area. So what I'll do at this point is I'll kind of continue wrapping the flat areas, not really going down too much in the curves. I'll hit that later with a torch. So now we're ready. This is tacked up. This is a good anchor for us. We don't need tape on this side anymore because we've got an area that's going to hold it from twisting and everything like that. So we can remove the anchor point tape that we had set up for the back area. And it's kind of better if you start on the inside and peel away to the outer edge rather than the other way, because that'll have a tendency to peel away from the backing. So now we're just going to take this up, fold it over, peel the backing off. If it gets folded up like that and kind of sticks to itself, just kind of gently peel it away. So this is a part where you might want to start applying heat a little bit, because we've got a compound curve, and if we just wrap it without putting some heat to it and pulling up right here, you'll notice that we're getting a little bit of wrinkles right there. So you don't want that to happen. You just want to be able to stretch it a little bit, especially around that top area. Now this is where we're using the torch. A couple things about the torch: it's not that hot. You can put your hands probably 6 to 8 inches away from it and it feels as hot as a hairdryer. If you're right up on it, it's really hot, obviously. Now here's the thing: some people comment and say, "Hey, use a heat gun, use a heat gun." Well, you don't need to use a heat gun, even though this stuff can get hot. It's not going to burn. Now, I'll take a tip of it here. It's directly on it. It's not burning it. It's starting to smoke a little bit, but that's because I was right on it. We'll let that cool down a little bit. What I like to do is back up 6 to 8 inches and keep it moving. A circular pattern like that. And you can get a good amount of heat on it. Way more heat than you need without risk of tearing it. Now there is one time where if you're using a heat gun, it'll do this as well. But if you're using a torch, it'll do it also. If you're pulling it as you're heating it, let's say we're pulling this tight and you have tension on it as you're pulling it, you may pull a hole into it. But it'll do that with a heat gun as well. Another thing too is if you have an area that's stuck together like this. If you've ever seen this, where it's stuck to itself and you want to pull it apart, well, if it's not heated up, it'll pull apart all day long. No problem. If it's stuck like that together and you put heat to it and you pull it apart, you're going to end up with a hole right there. So if you see that, you want to make sure and pull that apart first. Likewise for this area here where it's already tacked up a little bit. You don't want to heat that and then pull it up and then try to pull it back down. You want to make sure there's no contact to the area that you're going to have to pull up. So I'm pulled up all that I want to be pulled up here. It's off of the tank. Now I'm going to apply heat to this general area, concentrating kind of on this area because this is where that compound curve is. Compound meaning it's curved two ways, so it's curved up and straight and around that way. So those are compound curve areas are where you're going to have to stretch it a little bit. Let's go ahead and apply a little heat to it. Move it around. That's got a good amount of heat to it. I mean, I can see just how it's acting. It's got it's a little bit more stretchy. I can pull it out with my fingers like that, and you can see it kind of pulls out easier than if it was cooled down. If you get an area in it that's pulled up like that and it's distorted, you think that's not going to lay right, just heat it up again and it'll shrink back down. See how it made that disappear? This material is pretty innovative in doing that. So now we've got our area heated up. We're going to pull in two directions, up towards my right elbow and also down at the same time. I'm just going to mainly look at this middle area here as it's pulled tightly across. There is a little bit of wrinkles there and there's a little bit of wrinkles there. We can pull those out. I'll show you how to do that. Basically just grab underneath them here a little bit. And if it's really far down in there, it would be harder to do this. But since it's only a few inches down in there, you can do it easily. I'll heat it up. Just enough to kind of make it stretch a little bit. Just pop it up. There we go. A little bit of a bubble there. Small bubbles you can mash out with your fingers. So now we've got basically most of the whole side wrap. You'll see there is a curve radius right here. You'll want to make sure that the side piece of the wrap is above that curve radius, because up here is where your seam's going to be. So it doesn't matter if you got wrinkles up in here. This, as long as it's past that curve, you're good. And we might even wrap the top and have a seam come down along here. So we've got enough area that's flat to create a seam on. So now I'm going to show you how to take out a couple more areas. Down here at the bottom, that looks like a trouble area. It's really not. We'll just pull up a little bit of slack. There we go. And get it stretched out so it's not touching. Add some heat to it. There we go. And then take the felt, kind of smooth it out a little bit. So now we've got basically the whole top side of the tank wrap. We will have to do a little bit of tucking and edging around here, but I'll show you how to do that in the next step. We take a look, there's a few wrinkles here where it hadn't been pulled tight. We can do the same thing with it. We'll kind of pull up the ring up to the edge of the wrinkles, like so, and we'll just heat it up a little bit. Just put a little bit of heat on it, warm it up, and pull it tight out. Kind of wrap down the side, and then we've got a little bit of slack here. I may need to go around to the back side, kind of pull it in this direction. There we go. Kind of get it going here, pull it around. Just kind of make sure we get to a center point in the back of the tank. So if you imagine an imaginary line coming down the center, the sides actually meet in the back. So you end up with a seam here, and then there's going to be a seam where the top of the tank is going to be as well. So this is an area of the wrap for the tank. And you'll see this a lot of times on other areas of the bike too. We start to end up with excess areas. We're coming down to the trim line here, and it's also curved. So what you end up with is a little bit of excess material here. You can't solely just pull that out. You also have to do a little bit of shrinking. So to shrink it, we're just going to heat it up a little bit. Don't pull on it yet. Just let it start to kind of cool down. And you can see it's already shrank a little bit. We don't have those excess areas there. So then as it starts to finish cooling down, still kind of just grab it, pull it, and just take a little bit at a time, little rows at a time, and start to come down with it. May heat it up just a bit more. And just take your thumb and just get a little bit at a time. We don't want to trap air in there. We don't want to start in the middle or further down. We just want to go a little bit at a time. And as we start to get down into this absolute recess, this is where we applied a lot of the primer 94. So you want to be deliberate with how you press this in. You want to make sure you're pulling it tight. You want to make sure you're pressing it in. You want to make sure you're not trapping any air under there or wrinkles. And that area is good to go. We basically got to do that around the rest of the edge of the bike. So we can see there's a little bit of area here, some areas in the front, and then we'll be completed with one side of the tank. So on this bike you can see this black trim piece actually goes over on top of this and comes up to the edge. So you only have to be about a ½ inch below where this crease is, and then after that you kind of don't have to really worry about it much. We can trim away the rest of it. So I just want to get the rest of this below that trim area. So I'll stretch it a little bit. And we'll pull it down. Like that. And I'll just take and tuck it in on this groove right here. Kind of in the crease here. So now we're ready to trim off all the excess, all these wrinkled areas that's below the trim line for the tank. We're just simply going to take a sharp X-Acto and kind of drag along these areas below the trim line. Once you kind of get it started, you can be peeling it back as you go. So we'll continue this on throughout the back of the bike, below the seat line here, all the way to the back. Just quickly remove it. Now you'll notice too there's a little bit of primer 94 here with backing on it. I'd recommend you clean this off with alcohol at this point. If you want a super clean job, you could just leave it there, it'd be fine as well. So now I'm just going to take and clean off some of the excess adhesive and primer 94 that kind of went over. And the reason I'm doing this is because I could take the felt and I could kind of press out the seam a little bit more, but then I would get lint all stuck in that stuff. And you don't want to introduce more of that into the area. So just go ahead and take a paper towel and kind of lightly scrub it. You'll see it kind of start to come off a little bit. You don't have to be really detailed with it. Like I said, you could actually even just leave it there if you wanted to, but to make sure you get a really clean job, especially if you're wrapping a white bike or something like that. You don't want the primer 94 to get on there, even though it's covered up by trim, but there may be some areas near the front or something like that if you kind of look carefully, you could see body work underneath it. And if it was white and you had dirt and road grime, eventually sticking to that might start to look kind of nasty. So we'll go ahead and remove some of it. And then we'll just take the felt and kind of secure the edges. There's some areas here where it didn't quite go down. So we can get that off. There again, kind of smooth it out. And then just look for air bubbles. You don't see any air bubbles anywhere, especially around the edges. Pay attention to these parts. There's a little bit of a bubble sticking there. Just apply a little pressure to it. You may have to heat it up a little bit. And come back and get it. But that's all below the recess level. Now, at this part too, there's a little bit of residual adhesive on it, so I'm going to clean it in another step as well before we move on to the next part. So now I'm going to trim out the front here a little bit. What I like to do so I don't drag my edge of my knife along the edge of the tank, and that can do a couple things. It can make it easier to peel off paint, which you don't want to do, and then also it can dull your knife. What I like to do is I kind of start it, and then I turn my knife edge away from it slightly. And this is something you can kind of get a real feel for. But it'll allow you to cut to the edge without digging into the paint of the tank. So then once you do that, you get a really sharp, clean edge there as well. Just make sure and get some of those air bubbles out. So now we're going to trim away this excess, and we're going to create the seam that the left side of the top is going to be on. So we want to be above this curved ridge, and this will help trim away the excess. Also down here in this area, of course, where the right side of the tank is going to overlap here, we want to get all this excess material out of the way. So we want to trim it. Now when you trim this is where the seam's going to be. So you want to be accurate with it. You want it to be somewhat straight. You want it to curve and contour where you want it to contour. Come down in the middle here. So to be accurate, what I like to use is pinstriping. If you have some thin tape, you can do this as well. You can even eyeball it if you want to. I have a product here called knifeless stripping tape. And I'll show you how to use this stuff when we create a seam, but it works really well for laying out pinstriping like this, because you can do radiuses with it as you angle it, and you can actually lay out flames and things like that with it, so it's really accurate for laying out stuff like that. But we're just going to lay out a straight line, and as it comes towards the back here, we're going to contour it down just a little bit, come towards visually the middle of the bike, maybe slightly past it, and then do another seam here, and then come down. You'll notice I'm not at the exact center of the back of the tank, and that's because we're going to allow overlap for the other side, so you want to have a little bit excess there. So basically just make sure it looks good, get down on it, side it, make sure it looks straight. All I'm going to do here is I'm going to cut along this line. Now I could have laid this out first if you wanted to as well, and that would have allowed us to use the line in the knifeless stripping tape to cut the seam. But you can also do it afterwards like this and it'll be fine. And we'll just follow the line down. Continue on here. All the way down to the middle. There we go. Now we'll just take and peel this off. Just kind of do it somewhat slowly in case you didn't cut all the way through in some areas. You don't want to rip it. Right there it looks like it may be starting to rip a little bit. I think it's okay. So still straight all the way to the edge, and now we have our perfect seam. You can remove this. There's a little bit of excess knifeless stripping tape there. We can just remove that with our thumbnail, and then basically start on the right side now. Okay, so now we're getting ready to apply the right hand side. This is where the seam is going to be a little bit more crucial, and also it just helps in aiding and not cutting into the paint on the tank. You'll want to use this to lay out the exact opposite line on the other side of the tank. So make sure you're same distance up front, straight line here, same distance near from the gas tank. Use your index to kind of curve around a little bit there, and then eyeball it, make sure it looks okay. Come back down here to this middle point of the tank, and then as we get to this part, we're going to be on the other side because we want to allow for overlap. So give it a good 1/4 inch of overlap. Make sure it's straight, something like that. I'll take and trim this off here, give me enough edge to kind of grip whenever I cut it once we apply the side. Kind of smooth it out and secure it a little bit more. Now we're ready to start installing the right hand side. So now we've got the other side applied. Same as the left side, we did the right side. Only thing is we made sure and overlap the knifeless stripping tape, so you can see that seam, you can see the impression of it underneath. Go ahead and just make sure and smooth it out with the felt, and then we're going to grab the knifeless stripping tape. There's instructions how to do this whenever you order it. And you can order this from Fellers or Amazon. They both carry it. It's got a little piece of dental floss or something like that in the middle. All you do is you fold it over and grab it with your thumb and then push it down like that. So you're kind of folding over onto the crease, and then you quickly pull it up. See how it pulled up? Created a little string that goes over the middle. Just pull that string up, and rather than pulling it up, pull it kind of in the direction of where the tape's left. You don't want to pull it up this way, pull it up that way. And I'll kind of help cut it. So then you discard that piece, then you take your excess piece that you trimmed away, rip that off, discard that. Then you take, over here to this side, take the edge of it, and there's going to be two sides of it because that dental floss tore it in the middle. So you've got a left and right area of the dental floss that you need to pull out, and just pull it out away from the wrap. Don't yank it, just be nice and steady with it. It did come apart there a little bit, but you can see that it's actually still connected there. And if you do have a little excess piece that gets under there, just kind of be careful with it, get it with your fingernails. Now it's peeled all the way off. I can just help flatten it down a little bit more. This stuff's around $35 a roll. I don't know how many feet it comes with, but it's definitely worth it. So now we're getting ready to put on the top. You can see here we've got even area that we're just going to take a small area and kind of lay over the top. Before we do that, we want to take the stripping tape again, and this is going to lay out where our seams are going to be for the top. So they're going to overlap the top a little bit. So, maybe 1/4 of an inch over, something like that, just enough to kind of give it enough excess. Then just come down the edge here. Make sure you kind of press it in so it holds as it goes, and slowly lay out the seams as it goes across there, something like that. Trim that away, it looks good. Now we'll do the other side. Over here about 1/4 of an inch from the edge, and press it on so it holds. Come up to where it starts to turn a little bit. Put your finger on it. Slowly start arcing it as you run your finger across it. Come back down like so, and go ahead and cut it. Now just visually look at it, make sure it's about the same distance from the edge all the way around. Go ahead and press it in. Looks pretty good. So now we're going to apply the top piece, which is the large rectangle that's in your kit. Just cut it out there. We could, if you wanted to, we could lay out tape and kind of hold it down if we wanted to. As a matter of fact, I think I'll do that. We'll go ahead and get one little piece for the middle. Just make sure that we're in the center. Make sure we're going past our green seam back here where those touch. Make sure we're going past the front. And just kind of anchor it down in the middle there. That's good. That's all we need. And we don't need to tape it up or square it off because we can kind of eyeball it. Let's go ahead and just fold it in the middle there. Don't worry about the wrinkles it makes there in the middle. Peel this back like so, along to about the midway point or where the gas cap is. And just go ahead and cut the backing off and come to the front. And just kind of get it somewhat tight. Go across the front there. Like that. Make sure in the middle's good. Don't worry about the edges right now. So the middle and the front, we're going small circles, kind of just coming out, middle and in the front. There we go. So we got a tack point here. So now we'll take off the backing of the back side. If it rips, just start from the other side. Kind of get that going there. There is a little bit of a curve here. You could heat it, but you can actually probably get away without heating it because there's not a lot of wrinkles there. Just pull it tight. Make sure you're getting it tight and in the middle at your contact point down the center. Don't worry about the edges right now. So go ahead and just down the backbone middle of it here. Make sure we're going past the green seams, which is right about there. So now around the edges, just pull away and make sure you can smooth it out. Get around the gas cap area. You may get your fingernail and kind of dig down in the area so you can get in the recesses. And take a look at these areas right here. That's an area where you may put a little heat on it to kind of get those wrinkles out. Just pop it up past the wrinkle point. There we go. Pull it out and down. Let's make sure it's past the green line. So basically just make sure it's past the green line and press in all the way around. Up here towards the front is a little bit of a tricky area as well. We're getting over into a curve radius this way and that way, so it's a compound radius again. So go ahead and get it as close to the front as much as you can, and then we're going to heat this up and we're going to pull in two directions that way. There we go. And then come down to the lip of the front of the tank. Okay. And work your way back across the other side. Make sure and be over the green line. If there's wrinkles, just pull back up to them. There we go. The whole top's basically on there now, so we can, if the wrap goes below the green lines here, it's kind of better if you kind of cut those off a little bit, because if the wrap's doubled up at the edge, the green line's not going to cut through that. So you want to make sure it's cutting through just one layer of wrap. It's also good to remember which side you laid down first. I can pull it up here and see. So the last one we laid down was this one actually. So get it started, just fold it over, push it down, pop it, form our cut all the way to the front, and do the same thing with the other side. It's kind of didn't have enough slack there. Let's go ahead and trim it out a little bit. Get it started. There we go. Go ahead and come up with it. And we're ready to take off the excess. And let's see, ready to pull out the green side pieces of the knifeless tape for both sides. There we go. So got a little bit of excess material here to get rid of. And just take and smooth out the edges. I like to kind of start in the middle and push out rather than just going down one end and starting like that, because you can roll up a wrinkle. As you go the full length of the tank, it'll start building up slack and make a wrinkle at your edge. But if you do a little bit at a time and kind of go out away from the wrap, it's not as likely to do that. So now let's trim up this front area, just like we did the other sides. Make sure that's good to go here. And I'm just using my fingernail to kind of press in around the edge here. Then make sure you got a sharp knife and kind of go in like this. So in between the actual tank and then also the tank cap, there's like a groove where it's recessed down in there. Kind of just pull that along, but also make sure as you're pulling it that you're rotating your blade kind of away from the tank. That's something you'll kind of develop a little bit of finesse for as you do it. You'll feel the edge of the blade kind of start to grab into the tank if you don't have it rotated away enough. So just come around here. The main thing is to have a really sharp knife, and you can get an edge really good on it. Now just peel that away. Now all we got to do is kind of press this in. Maybe kind of tuck it down in there a little bit with your fingernail again. So now we've got a really tight edge. This is actually pretty resilient to gasoline too, so if you spill gas on there, just wipe it off. It's not going to bubble up. It's not going to make the laminate separate. It's not going to discolor. It'll be fine. Just wipe it off and then go on about your way. If you're somewhere where you can wipe it with soapy water or alcohol after the gas spills on it, by all means go ahead and do that. But if you're on a trip, just wipe it away with a cloth and water and it should be fine.